Konnichiwa, minasan. O genki desu ka? Welcome to the advanced course of my channel. Let's learn Japanese with Eric. In this lesson, we will learn how to conjugate regular verbs into their honorific and humble forms. Yoroshii desu ka? Hajimemashou. Back in lesson 97, I gave a short introduction about Japanese honorific and humble speech. You would use them when speaking to or about a social superior, when talking to a customer, or applying for a job, or when you just want to sound very respectful. Honorific and humble speech is almost an art form and gives a very good social impression to your listener and the people around you. And in order to speak in honorific and humble styles, we use a combination of 4 strategies. First is adding the prefixes o or go to nouns that are associated with the listener or the person whom you're talking about that you hold in high esteem. We tackled this in the previous lesson, lesson 98. Second is conjugating verbs into their honorific and humble forms. And the third strategy is to use special honorific and humble verbs instead of their neutral forms. And we do this for about 15 very common Japanese verbs, such as to go, eat, drink, to be, to say, etc. We will study this in the next lesson, lesson 100. And the fourth is expressing ordinary actions in terms of giving and receiving actions, which we've already tackled in lesson 70. In this lesson, lesson 99, we will study the second strategy. So let's get started. There are 2 ways to form the honorific of a verb. The first is the general rule where you take the conjunctive form of the verb, attach the prefix o, and add ni naru or nasaru. To conjugate into the other tenses and modalities, you conjugate the verbs naru and nasaru. Nasaru is an irregular verb and conjugates as nasatta, nasatte as its plain past and te forms, and nasaimasu in its formal form. Nasaru is more polite than ni naru. The second way is to form the passive conjugation of the verb, and we learned how to do this in lesson 79. When we use the passive form, the particles used in the rest of the sentence would be the same as that of an ordinary sentence. Now, to form the humble version of the verb, the general formula is to take the conjunctive form of the verb, attach the prefix o, and then attach the verb suru or itasu. Itasu is more polite than suru, and you conjugate suru and itasu when forming other tenses and modalities. These general rules don't apply if the verb has special honorific or humble forms, and there are only a handful of them, about 15, which we will tackle in the next lesson, lesson 100. To illustrate these rules, let's use the verb kaku, to write. Its conjunctive form is kaki. Honorific versions would be okaki ni naru and okaki nasaru. Using the passive form, the honorific is kakareru. All these honorific forms refer to actions that your listener or the person whom you're talking about and respect will do. By using honorific forms, you elevate the status of your listener and relatively lower yourself. The humble form is okaki suru or okaki itasu, and they refer to the actions that you, the speaker, will do. By using humble forms, you lower yourself and relatively raise the status of your listener. Because the conjunctive form plays such a huge role in this conjugation, let's do a quick review of how to form it. Now, if you know the mas form of the verb, simply drop the masu, and what's left is the conjunctive form. So, for example, if you've got the verb akemasu, meaning will open, drop the mas, and the remainder, ake, is the conjunctive form, which is then what you use to form the honorific and humble forms. But if you don't know the mas form, but know the dictionary form of the verb, Then here's how you form the conjunctive form. For category 1 or ru-dropping verbs, we drop the ru ending of the dictionary form and what's left is the conjunctive form. So for example, akeru, drop the ru and ake is our conjunctive form. For category 2 or last hiragana changing verbs, we have 9 kinds of verb endings: kugusu, bumunu, rutsu, and u. These last hiragana endings of the dictionary form change to the I series, which are kigishi, bimini, richi, and I. And that's how you form their conjunctive forms. With category 2 verbs, we pay attention to just the last hiragana of the dictionary form. As for the 5 commonly used irregular verbs, suru, to do, kuru, to come, iku, to go, aru, to exist, inanimate, and da, the verb to be, is or am, these all use special verbs for their honorific and humble forms, and these are all taken up in the next lesson, lesson 100. In the succeeding slides, we will look at examples of verbs in each verb category and have example sentences for most of them. To answer or reply is kotaeru, kotaeru, a category 1 or ru-dropping verb. Conjunctive form is kotae. Honorific forms are okotae ni naru, okotae ni naru, and okotae nasaru, okotae nasaru. The passive form is kotae rareru, kotae rareru. Humble forms are okotae suru, and okotae itasu, okotae itasu. For example, 2 company employees talking about the company president. The employee asks his supervisor, 社長にどうお答えになったんですか? 社長にどうお答えになったんですか? How did you answer the company president? Now, using passive form, the employee could also say, 社長にどう答えられたんですか? 社長にどう答えられたんですか? And the supervisor replies, 当たり前じゃ、はいと申し上げたよ。当たり前じゃ、はいと申し上げたよ。Of course, I said yes. Now, 申し上げる is a special humble verb of the verb you, meaning to say. The employee uses honorifics to refer to the actions of his supervisor, while the supervisor uses humble form to describe his own actions in response to the company president, whom he respects. Now, by using honorifics in even casual conversation like this, the social hierarchy in Japanese society is apparent. To listen is kiku, a category 2 verb. Conjunctive form is kiki. Honorific forms are okiki ni naru, okiki ni naru, and okiki nasaru, okiki nasaru. Passive form, kikareru, kikareru. Humble forms, okiki suru, okiki suru, and okiki itasu, okiki itasu. For example, a reporter interviews a celebrity and speaks in honorifics to the celebrity. And so the reporter asks, 先ほどお聞きになっていた曲は何ですか? 先ほどお聞きになっていた曲は何ですか? What music did you listen to earlier? And using passive form, the reporter could also have said, 先ほど聞かれていた音楽は何ですか? Celebrity replies, 聞いていたのはシナトラの My Way です。聞いていたのはシナトラの My Way です。What I listened to was Sinatra's My Way. The celebrity is not obliged to speak in honorific or humble style to the reporter, hence the ordinary plain conjugation, 聞いていた. To hurry is isogu, another category 2 verb. Conjunctive form is isogi. Honorific forms are oisogi ni naru, oisogi ni naru, and oisogi nasaru, oisogi nasaru. Passive form, 急がれる、急がれる. Humble forms are お急ぎする、お急ぎする and お急ぎいたす、お急ぎいたす. For example, a manager asks his worker, 4時の新幹線に間に合う? 4時の新幹線に間に合う? Will you make it on time for the 4 o'clock bullet train? Worker replies using humble speech. お急ぎしましたら間に合うと思います。お急ぎしましたら間に合うと思います。If I hurry, I think I'll make it on time. To look for is 探す, also a category 2 verb. Conjunctive form is 探し. Honorific forms お探しになる, お探しになる and お探しなさる, お探しなさる. Passive form 探される, 探される. Humble forms お探しする, お探しする and お探しいたす, お探しいたす. For example, a student may tell his professor about his future plans using humble speech. 卒業してから東京で仕事をお探しします。卒業してから東京で仕事をお探しします。After graduation, I look for work in Tokyo. To call is 呼ぶ, also category 2. Conjunctive form is 呼び. Honorific forms お呼びになる, お呼びになる and お呼びなさる, お呼びなさる. Passive form 呼ばれる, 呼ばれる. Humble forms お呼びする, お呼びする and お呼びいたす, お呼びいたす. A nurse asks a patient speaking in honorific as respect for the patient. 田中さん、タクシーをお呼びになりましたか? 田中さん、タクシーをお呼びになりましたか? Mr. Tanaka, did you call a taxi? The nurse could also use passive. 田中さん、タクシーを呼ばれましたか? 田中さん、タクシーを呼ばれましたか? Patient Tanaka replies, はい、呼びました。はい、呼びました。Yes, I called. Nurse says, 来ましたよ。来ましたよ。The taxi is here. Now, the patient isn't obliged to use honorific or humble speech to the nurse. Hence, the patient uses the neutral polite form, 呼びました. To read is 読む, also a category 2 verb. Conjunctive is 読み. Honorific forms お読みになる, お読みになる and お読みなさる, お読みなさる. Passive form 読まれる, 読まれる. Humble forms お読みする, お読みする and お読みいたす, お読みいたす. A writer asks her editor, 台本はもうお読みになりましたか? 台本はもうお読みになりましたか? Have you read my screenplay? Now using passive, the writer could also say, 台本はもう読まれましたか? 台本はもう読まれましたか? Editor says, まだです。これから読みます。まだです。これから読みます。Not yet. I will read it from now on. To make is 作る, also a category 2 verb. Conjunctive is 作り. Honorific forms お作りになる, お作りになる and お作りなさる, お作りなさる. Passive form 作られる, 作られる. Humble forms お作りする, お作りする and お作りいたす, お作りいたす. A supplier is showing his customer a sample, and the customer is impressed. 素晴らしい見本ですね。素晴らしい見本ですね。Wonderful sample. どなたがお作りになったんですか？どなたがお作りになったんですか？ Who made it? Using passive, customer could also say, どなたが作られたんですか？どなたが作られたんですか？ And the supplier replies humbly, ありがとうございます。私が作らせていただきました。私が作らせていただきました。Thank you very much. I made it. Now, 作らせていただきました uses the giving and receiving of actions as a strategy, and we learned how to do this back in lesson 70. Literally, it means I received the action of being allowed to make the sample from you, giving credit back to the customer. It sounds very humble. To wait is matsu, another category 2 verb. Conjunctive form is machi. Honorific forms omachi ni naru, omachi ni naru, and omachi nasaru, omachi nasaru. Passive form matareru, matareru. Humble forms omachi suru, omachi suru, and omachi itasu, omachi itasu. A supplier calls on her customer and speaks first to the secretary, and the secretary says, 部長はただいま会議中です。もうすぐ終わりますが、お待ちになりますか？部長はただいま会議中です。もうすぐ終わりますが、お待ちになりますか？ The manager is still in a meeting, but it'll end soon. Would you wait? Using passive form, the secretary could also ask, 待たれますか？待たれますか? And the supplier is willing to wait, and she says, はい、お待ちいたします。はい、お待ちいたします。Yes, I'll wait. To meet is au, another category 2 verb. Conjunctive is ai. Honorific forms, お会いになる、お会いになる。お会いなさる、お会いなさる。Passive form, 会われる、会われる。Humble forms, お会いする、お会いする。and お会いいたす、お会いいたす。お会いできてとても光栄です。お会いできてとても光栄です。I am very honored to meet you. Now, this is a humble greeting that you can say to someone whom you're very happy to meet, like a VIP. Dekite is the te form of dekiru, and dekiru is the shortcut ability version of suru. O ai dekite totemo koei desu. I'm very honored to meet you. So to summarize, in this lesson, we learned how to convert common verbs into their honorific and humble forms. Honorific forms refer to those actions done by the listener or the person you're talking about whom you have high respect for, while humble forms refer to the speaker or your own actions. By using humble forms, you lower yourself and in the process elevate your listener. Now there are two main ways to form the honorific. First, take the conjunctive form of the verb, add the prefix o, and then attach ni naru or nasaru. Nasaru is more polite than ni naru. The second way to form the honorific is to use the passive form of the verb, and we learned how to make passive forms back in lesson 79. To form the humble, take the conjunctive form of the verb, add the prefix o, and attach suru or itasu. Itasu is more polite than suru. In the next lesson, we will look at special verbs that are used for honorific and humble forms instead of the conjugation patterns that we just discussed in this lesson. So see you in the next one. お疲れ様でした。 If you're serious about becoming fluent in Japanese, it's important to practice daily, learn grammar, and build up vocabulary. My whole course is designed to give you a strong basic foundation in the Japanese language that you can build solidly upon. So please click like, share, or subscribe and watch the next video in the series. 日本語の勉強に頑張ってください。じゃあ、またね。